Against the Law, the myth-busting ancient history podcast. Today's episode is music to my ears, quite literally, since we'll be learning about music in the ancient world. Before I wax lyrical about the topic, I'll remind you to listen out for this noise. That's the sound of our ancient law gavel smacking down on the snare drum of misconceptions about the ancient world. Today's lineup is fantastic. Let me introduce you to the band. Playing the lyre for the ancient Romans, we've got Xenia. Meg will be playing the aulos, the ancient Greek double pipes. On the Babylonian bells, we have Barney, representing the ancient Near East. Playing the electric kithara, we have our special guest, Dr Jeremy Swist. He's our visiting classicist whose love for ancient history is matched only by his love for heavy metal. I'm Flo, and I'll be on grade 3 recorder today since I don't actually know much about the ancient world. But I'm going to play it by ear today and learn along with you, our listeners.
If we can't properly hear music from the ancient world, how can we look at its representation and its, the reality it did exist? What's the closest we can come? Do we look at texts? Do we look at imagery of the instruments? How does everyone else's disciplines kind of help them to reconstruct what music might have been like in the ancient world?
I think definitely all of what you've mentioned. We see pictures of different instruments on pots. We know we love pots and everything that they can tell us. We can also, there have been some, you can get some clues from texts as well. One of my favourite texts is a guy called Lucian who wrote a piece in defence of a particular kind of musical dance called pantomime. So he writes this sort of defense, and it's funny, the person, it's written in the dialogue form. So he's making up an argument, and he's supposed to be sort of defending the art of pantomime, the art of dance, against someone who thinks it's crude and unsophisticated. And this guy says, well, it's just not as good as the Greek classics, the comedy, the tragedy, all these lovely kithara concerts, kithara being a sort of guitar type thing. So he's this maybe more sort of socially conservative person that Lucian is arguing against, thinks that all of this sort of Greek musical style is really classical and really sophisticated, a bit like how we might think of opera or ballet today. And what Lucian's trying to do is defend this very Roman art form, which is sort of like interpretive dance matched with musical instruments and singing. So they sing about a collection of different myths. They'll take a little snippet of one myth and then go to another myth, a little bit like someone who stitched together a compilation of the best bits of 300 Gladiator and HBO's Rome Today. They sort of jump between it's like a highlight reel of ancient mythology, and the pantomimus, the pantomime dancer, he would act them all out to musical accompaniment.
Oh, that's amazing. So we know, are you saying we know about that from a sort of this description of it in Lucian?
Yes, mainly in Lucian, but also in some other texts. In fact, Ovid wrote a really famous text called Metamorphoses, which was epic, but it was also like a collection of myths, a retelling of all sorts of different ancient mythology. And there's one really interesting theory that I read recently where that was sort of proposing that Ovid wrote this particular format, which was a totally new format, as a reflection of the brand new art of pantomime that had just started becoming popular among the Roman elite.
No way, that's so cool.
Yeah.
What a great...
So you see proper cultural interaction there between music and poetry and politics as well.
There's definitely parallels in Plato's Symposium, which is a very well-known work, which describes this sort of dinner party. A symposium is what it's called. There's lots of descriptions of how music is part of a dinner party. So there's this sort of figure in descriptions of ancient dinner parties of the flute girl, which is a sort of a prostitute or a slave girl who plays the aulos, which we mentioned earlier. And again, it's really interesting that it's often seen as a distraction. It's like, oh, get rid of the flute girl. We're men trying to talk about serious man things, and then one of them will be like, no, I want to get drunk and have fun and listen to the flute girl. So that's a sort of very literary description, and that doesn't give us a good sense of what kind of music the flute girl will be playing, but it does give us that interesting sense of how that kind of music was sort of culturally viewed, if that makes sense.
with no ancient history background, I think of the lyre when I think of ancient musical instruments. So firstly, how do we know what they sounded like?
There is somebody in the U.S. Named Bettina Joy de Guzman, and she not only researches ancient music, but she actually also performs it with reconstructed period instruments. So you can she is at Ancient Lyric on Twitter, and from there you can find her stuff and you can listen to some of her music. And so she's set a lot of kind of ancient poetry to kind of her interpretation of how it may have sounded like.
Jeremy, you've also just opened us up to a potential etymology there, since we're talking about lyres, and you said lyric.
Yeah.
I might let Meg handle that one.
Well, yeah, I mean, fairly self-explanatory. That's where the word comes from. Lyric comes from lyre. A lyric poem in ancient Greece is a poem accompanied by the lyre. But also, if we're doing etymology hour, which we like to do, although it won't be a full hour, don't worry, the word music itself, the topic of this whole podcast, comes from an ancient Greek word, musa, which is the name, muse, which is again the same word where we get muse, as in if you say like, oh, she's my muse for a painting or a song or whatever. And the muses are ancient Greek goddesses who are really connected to lots of different types of sort of creativity and learning, and they inspire you to create music or poetry or whatever. But interestingly, muse is also where we get the word museum, through the same kind of connection of a place of learning and inspiration and research. So I thought that was cool, that those two fairly important cultural things nowadays, both from the same word.
So the museum in Alexandria, the Museion, It was founded, as a temple of the muses. That's why it was called that. And it was technically, a religious society, which provided them sort of the context and the legitimacy to, conduct their research into literature and science and whatnot, because it was seen as a kind of a ritual activity in devotion to, again, these goddesses of, literature, music, creativity. And I believe Plato also founded the academy as such a thing, as a sacred precinct to the muses in the grove of Academus.
Yeah.
So definitely that connection there.
Cool instrument that I think I wanted to mention, which is a salpinx, and I hadn't heard of this before looking into this, and it's a sort of trumpet-ish instrument, and this is something I didn't know at all, that this shows of how important music was to ancient Greek society. It crops up almost everywhere, including in warfare. So I just thought that was interesting. I was thinking about this earlier, actually, Jeremy, when you were saying that war is one of the key themes that we modern metal music takes from the ancient world, that actually this salpinx would be used in ancient battles, because the sort of commander could play specific notes on the salpinx, or specific almost melodies that would denote different commands. So it'd be a way of, it's a battle command, basically getting out an instruction to loads and loads of people. You could do that on the salpinx, which I had no idea that was a thing. I thought that was really, really interesting.
And synthesized trumpets are definitely used, not infrequently in heavy metal, with especially songs about that subject material. So
if we're on to obscure instruments, then I think one from my neck of the woods that crops up is the sistrum. I don't know if anybody's heard of that.
I really hoped you were going to mention the sistrum.
Whoa! A sistrum is essentially a fancy rattle, and it's associated with ancient Egypt, but it does crop up. I don't think they found any from Mesopotamia, but there's images of them on seals that you would use to seal a clay tablet, for example. And it looks a bit like a wishbone from a chicken, if you basically strung bars across the pronged bit and then put rattly bits of metal on it, basically. It's associated with a couple of goddesses in Egypt. So I think it's one of Isis's tools, and Bastet, the cat goddess, as well. Because it's a percussion instrument, I think it has associations with ritual. Different instruments suit different genres better, at least in the ancient Near East. And percussion and ritual seem to go hand in hand. So we like a sistrum over in the ancient Near East.
The percussion and ritual is definitely also true in Greece. You get the tympanum, which is, or tympanon, which is like a tambourine, basically. In fact, now I'm looking at that, that must be where we get that word. That's another etymology, but I hadn't even made the link. Which is, again, it's used by worshippers, like the Maenads, who are the women who worship Dionysus. So that's, again, a drum, kind of the ritual procession element of music.
Yeah, when you bring up the sistrum, what I think about is, connecting it to stereotypes of the East, for the Romans. So if we go back to Book 8 of the Aeneid and the Shield of Aeneas, where it depicts Cleopatra, there's a line of it which would translate as something like, the queen in the midst of the battle summons the battle lines with her native sistrum, patrio sistro. Okay, so not using a salpinx to marshal her, the navy or whatever, but she's using a sistrum as this, in order to command this battle. Something that is, evokes this, this foreignness.
Cleopatra also identified herself with the goddess Isis as well. So it makes sense if the sistrum is also associated with Isis, and then that translates back onto Cleopatra as well. The one thing that I've found with these pantomime musicians is, so there could be three of them all playing different instruments. The three instruments that they used were the pan pipes, exactly the same as how we have today, just the little tubes that are different lengths and you blow into them. And they would also have a lyre, and they would have a tiny little drum that you could attach to your shoe, and you just tap it. So you tap your foot on the floor, and that would also tap the drum. And yeah, sometimes there would be one person on each instrument, but the way the instruments are arranged, if you sort of strap the pan pipes just in front of your mouth, and then you have your guitar in the middle, and then you have your little drum on your foot, you could be a one-man band.
That is quite cool. I want, because you see those occasionally. I don't know if it's the same in the US, but in the UK, especially in sort of olden days, I guess you could say, Victorian times, around then, you had a lot of one-man band sort of activities with a foot pedal drum and cymbals and all sorts, and a harmonica, things like that. I don't know if the US has a similar thing. Usually people are street performers who get their money that way. But I find that I always love when things don't change throughout history.
We have those, so I grew up in Boston, and so a lot of people do busking at Faneuil Hall and downtown, and I've definitely seen those types of performers there.
I want to say in honor of our excellent guest a couple of weeks ago, Caroline, there's an instrument called the koudunia, I believe, in ancient Greece, which is these copper bells, which I believe had an apotropaic function. So we need Caroline's bell back. The apotropaic alarm it was. So that idea of musical instruments are also involved, as we've been saying, in religion, worship of Dionysus and other gods and goddesses, but also in this sense of warding off evil spirits. So music again plays a role in both, in the good and the bad.
In Western music theory, there are these things called modes, right? And I think it's, again, none of us are music experts, so I hope we're not making any huge mistakes here, but it changes what the starting note is of a particular, a chord or something like that. So and if you listen to these different modes, often the other ones, they're called Doric and Phrygian and Locrian and stuff like that. They do sound very Eastern, but you can't necessarily explain why. Possibly because some of them are in minor, they more reflect a minor scale and stuff like that. But it's fascinating that just hearing some of these modes can make you think of a different place or a different style of music, even though it's just a different order in which you play the notes. I have a fun game that we could play.
Yes.
It's called Ancient or Modern Lyric.
Oh,
brilliant.
yes.
So I'm going to read two little couplets, and you see if you can work out which one is the ancient lyric and which one is the modern lyric.
Okay, that sounds good to me.
Here we go. I've got: Ea rewards the sages with 7 gems. Each is stamped onto copper and burnished gold. That's the first.
Right.
And
Okay.
The second: they turned the city into a swamp. They did all that, like reeds in a wasteland. Life could not be revived.
Ooh.
That's the second.
Oh, this is hard.
I think that the first one sounds like a glamorization of the ancient world.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, it sounds like one of those questions where the one that seems more obvious is probably not it.
It might be a trick question, and the second
Yeah.
one is just a line from a Shrek musical. But yeah, I think the first one is like fake antiquity, and the second one is real, real ancient.
I'm
Okay.
going to go against the grain and just say the opposite, the obvious choice. This is like in QI, this is going to be the red button choice, but I'm going to say the other way around.
Okay, so well, in that case, I can tell you that Flo's intuition was correct. Aya Rewards the Sages is from Melekesh's album Sphinx, and it's a song called Apkallu Council. Whereas the second little couplet was from a Sumerian lament for the city of Uruk after its destruction.
Nice. Sounds very similar to like, Hull or something. That's why, I felt that resonate with me.
I mean, we can't really talk about like genres maybe in the ancient world, but certainly types of song. And they were quite big on lamentations, and we have the words from a few of them. So that's where I got this one today. So this is from the start of the second millennium BC, so around sort of 1900. And in the previous millennium, Sumer had been completely destroyed, basically, and so there are all these laments for the cities, the big cities of Sumer, like Uruk, Eridu, and so that's the context of this, and it's basically was designed to be sung to a goddess Inanna, one of the patron goddesses.
So it's like old Leonard Cohen sort of vibes.
Yeah.
I'm not as familiar with that Melekesh album. My favorite album is Emissary, is the one after it, and that's the one where there's a lot of Enuma Elish stuff there.
Also,
nice.
Jeremy, if you know any of the answers, you've got to keep it to yourself and just like confidently say, yeah, I think it's A or I think it's B, even if you know which one it is, so that we can lose against you. But we've got a point each, Jeremy. Barney, have you got any more for us?
Oh no,
I've got
I'm
one
spent.
actually.
Oh, nice.
It may be more obvious, but okay. So this is. I'm going to give you two sort of couplets. So the first one is, when you know your time is close at hand, maybe then you'll understand. And the second one is, life exists only for a while, and time demands his due.
Oh, I think that the first one is modern because it rhymes, and I think that the second one is ancient because when you translate something, unless you're a skilled poet as well as a language expert, I don't think you always make it rhyme. That's my reasoning.
Fair enough. I'm just going to say that could be a sort of double bluff. I could have made it rhyme for you, but fair enough. Other guesses?
That's true.
I think that the first one is the ancient and the second one is the modern. I think you're doing what everyone thought I was doing last time and playing with expectations.
Unfortunately, I was not playing with expectations.
Oh no!
The first one, the one that rhymed, is from Iron Maiden, "Hallowed Be Thy Name." But the second one is from so life exists only for a while, and time demands his due. That is from the Seikilos epitaph, which is actually the oldest surviving complete composition, like music composition with notation. So it's quite a well-known thing, and it's a sort of music and lyrics. So it's got ancient Greek music notation and lyrics, and they're engraved on a sort of monument from a town in, I think it's in what's now Turkey, and it's from either the 1st or the 2nd century AD. We're not quite sure. And yeah, it's this sort of. I'll read you the whole thing actually. There's only 4 lines. It says, "While you live, shine, have no grief at all. Life exists only for a while, and time demands his due." That's someone else's translation, not mine. I would maybe slightly query it looking at the Greek, but yeah, isn't that lovely? And it's a sort of monument, a memorial for someone.
Can it be sung?
It can be. I won't be doing that for you, unfortunately.
Go on.
It can be. And the Greek is it has notation, and I think if you look it up, there are. There's recordings where people have tried to match it and work out how it would actually have sounded, which is really, really cool. But I would absolutely butcher it, so I'm not going to do that for you.
And it's interesting, Meg, that you mentioned that you could hear the lyrics of that inscription set to music on YouTube, because I think this is quite a popular thing for people to do, is to try and reconstruct sounds from the ancient world. So like if you go on YouTube, you can hear a man singing the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh, accompanied by a long stringed instrument. But like it's completely speculative. So I guess this is a big like capital letters against the law here, is that there is no way you can hear ancient music, and a lot of work has been done to try and recreate it, but it is just impossible. So these Hurrian hymns are not like strictly native to Mesopotamia. They're from a town called Ugarit, which is in modern Syria, and they found these tablets that have what they think is the earliest musical notation, and only one of them I think can be recreated with or is near to be complete. So these were written in cuneiform, and the tablets describe various ways of tuning the instrument that played them, which is most likely a lyre. And yeah, they are hymns to goddesses, these songs, to deities, these songs. And there's been a lot of work done to try and recreate them, but I think even the most authoritative scholars say, we will not be able to hear these. It is speculative. So yeah, that's a bit of a danger when going down the YouTube rabbit hole of looking at music in the ancient world, is that, a lot of it is not realistic.
So music today is understood in terms of tones. So one note from another can be a tone of difference, and then you have like a semitone in between them. But we don't know whether in ancient times they thought of music in that same way, as having those like distinctions between types of notes. So their understanding of what differentiated one note from another one might be very different to ours. So I think that's another reason why we might find it very difficult to understand how this might be heard or might be played. The particular type of violin music that's played on the Black Sea coast of Turkey, but that to us sounds out of tune, and it's very arrhythmic as well. But that might be possibly what ancient music might sound like to us.
That might drive me insane, because I hate improvised jazz. Something about not having a musical motif drives me absolutely nuts. So like improv jazz, where it's like really it drives me absolutely insane. You've mentioned violins. Is it against the law that Nero played the fiddle as he watched the city burn?
Yes. 2 reasons. Number 1, he wasn't in Rome when it caught fire. He was at his holiday home. Number 2, the violin didn't exist as such. We have the lyre, which was sort of plucked with fingers, and I think the kithara was also played the same way. Meg, you might know more about the difference between the two, because I'm not totally clear on that. But yeah, he did not play the fiddle while Rome burned.
The kithara, I think, is a sort of professional version of the lyre. That the lyre is almost like a learning instrument, or for your everyday music. Whereas the kithara is you need to be quite good at it, and it's more difficult to play. Is my understanding of it. So it's like
I see, like a half-size cello versus a full-size cello type thing, or like a ukulele versus a guitar.
Yeah, I think it's like you learn to play on the lyre, and then so maybe when Hercules kills his music teacher Linus, maybe he just graduated to the kithara. Or it's like, do you know what it's like? Is what we talked about a few weeks ago, where you get upgraded to your big boy handwriting pen.
Yes, I was going to say exactly the same thing. Is it like getting your pen license?
Why did we already mention this? I think it must have been in the education episode. Why do we keep talking about those barrel pens?
Jeremy, have you ever heard of a pen license?
A what?
Is
that an acronym?
No, it's like a rite of passage for British children. In schools in Britain, you learn handwriting. You learn your joined up handwriting, right? So, and you've got to do it with a pencil. Yeah, cursive handwriting, and you've got to do it with a pencil. And then there is a very specific type of pen you get gifted at school, and it's not even your pen. You just borrow it from the school, which is a very chunky red pen with blue or black ink, and they're called Beryl pens. And it's like a universal British experience that you graduate from pencil to pen when your handwriting's good enough. And I don't know if there's anything in the US, because when we were talking about instruments, I was like, the lyre is like the Casio keyboard to the grand piano of the kithara. And in music practice in school, we had these Casio keyboards, and it would be awful in a music lesson because we'd all be playing them out loud, and there's buttons that say things like,
I know what you're going to say. Yeah,
DJ.
the sound effects.
Do you remember the band Klaxons?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Who had golden scans in like 2006, maybe? Klaxons used those sound effects on one of their songs.
They are so funny. What was the one? There was one.
DJ.
DJ. Yeah.
Jeremy at this point is just glazed over with the sheer like
parochial Britishness.
2000s nostalgia.
I mean, if you want to carry on with liars, there's some pretty good ones that, you know, we haven't got onto objects so much today, and I've got some nice Sumerian liars that we could talk about. They were as popular in Mesopotamia as they were in Greece and Rome, it sounds. And there's a couple that are reconstructed, but you can see in the British Museum, and they are incredibly ornate. And they're wooden, and so they'd actually had decayed. But when Leonard Woolley, the excavator of Ur, dug them up, he poured plaster of Paris into the holes left by the decaying organic matter. And so he was able to take them out, and they really are beautiful. They're quite tall, maybe like at least a meter, and they have bull's heads on the front of them, and they're engraved. I think one is gold and the other is in shell and lapis lazuli and stuff like that. And they're really amazing, but it's not really the sort of thing that you might find someone busking using. I think these were like royal instruments because they would have been incredibly valuable. But they're huge. I think nine stringed. But again, because you don't know the tuning, we'll never know what they sound like.
I think if we could go back in time and listen, that'd be absolutely fascinating in any culture, sort of ancient music, because our idea of absolute slappers, absolute bangers of music will be completely different to ancient history. I think this a lot about Mozart, because I want to know what the equivalency is like, because if you listen to Mozart now, you're probably a certain sort of type of person with a certain socioeconomic background, but I wonder if Mozart was like the Skrillex of his time or the Lil Nas X of his time, and people would be like, oh my god, have you heard, he's coming out with a new concert, let's go listen to it.
I think that happened in like 5th century Athens with like Euripides, and Euripides was pilloried by Aristophanes for all numbers of reasons, but I think one of them was the notion that Euripides was doing essentially experimental avant-garde music. If you read Euripides, in Greek, and you get to the choral lyrics, and there are these all sorts of different meters and arias and stuff that you don't see in things like Aeschylus. And so, when I think of Aristophanes' frogs, I think of like, this is the classic, Aeschylus versus Euripides, and Aeschylus is like, the Mozart, the classical music, and then Euripides is the jazz, if you will, and they're sort of clashing with each other. And so, and Euripides, ahead of its time, was just not appreciated, for what it was until like at least a later generation when they come to appreciate that. So, I definitely think there was an analogy to what you just brought up with Mozart.
Absolutely. That's actually something we haven't really talked about much, is the importance of music in theatre. So like ancient Greek tragedy, so you just mentioned Euripides and Aeschylus, who are two of the three big tragedians, and Sophocles is the other one. But tragedy itself, Aristotle says that the origin of tragedy is from the dithyramb, which is a song sung at sort of ancient festivals. And again, it's very much that ritual sense. A dithyramb often, I think, sung for Dionysus specifically. So as singing with the aulos, with the tympanums that I mentioned earlier. And then out of that choral song, that's where Aristotle thinks we get the origins of drama itself, of someone kind of stepping out of the chorus and doing their own little bit. And then
Thespis, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And the tragedies that we have, as you said, they still have the chorus as a major element, which is, again, that's like our word chorus, sort of singing. And the word tragedy is not actually, I don't think anyone's 100% sure where the etymology is, where it exactly comes from, but tragos is goat and oide is song, so that's a potential etymology. It's goat song. Not really sure where the goat comes in. A couple of theories that it's like goat skin outfits that people would have worn, or a goat as the prize for a tragedy competition. But yeah, so even the word tragedy has the word song in it.
Jeremy, you just mentioned a word that I wonder if the etymology is shared with thespian. Is that the person who steps out? Because thespian's quite quite an old word for an actor?
So Thespis was a 6th century person who originally wrote, choral lyrics for a chorus, but he was the first person to then step away from the chorus and then become the first actor, because he was, instead of just telling a story through the chorus itself, he stepped away from the chorus and had a dialogue with the chorus in order to dramatize, and become a character in the narrative that they were singing about. And so it's because he's the first actor, according to the sources, that all actors are now called thespians.
I was quite proud of myself for getting that etymology there. So what was everyone's favourite bit, either from this episode or the last one? Jeremy, why don't you go first?
I really liked the discussion about the sistrum and kind of the association of various musical instruments with, the East and the other. So that's going to be a good takeaway for me, among a lot of other things mentioned today.
Barney, how about you? What was your favourite thing to learn today?
I particularly liked Jeremy's explanations about the irrational in music, and especially those themes that people might not commonly associate with metal, like love and these ballads and stuff. And as you remember at the time, I was especially surprised to hear about Orpheus and the incorporation of Orpheus into these metal songs. So yeah, I think that was a really fascinating insight that I hadn't thought about previously.
Brilliant. Meg, how about you? What was your favourite thing to learn today?
My favourite thing was actually the sort of Jeremy Barney conversation about the Sumerian and Akkadian roots in metal songs, and the Enuma Elish. I thought that was really, really cool. And again, I mean, I don't know metal very well in general, but I definitely didn't know that part of it. So that was really interesting for me.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting as well. Xenia, how about you? What was your favourite?
My favourite takeaway is not quite as sophisticated as the others. I just like the idea of graduating from your lyre to your big kithara.
I just find it funny because it's like the lyre is like your recorder and the kithara is like a clarinet or something. So it's like it's like you graduate from
it's
tooting
just very
along.
familiar. It's very familiar, isn't it, to all of us who had to do music at primary school?
Definitely.
Yeah,
Jeremy.
And the kithara is definitely really cool. And if you see vase paintings with it, this thing is huge. I saw a vase painting, in a museum the other day, where it was the goddess Nike, winged and everything, and she's holding a kithara, and it's almost as big as her. This giant thing, and I love that image because it reminded me this is Epinician music here, sort of contained in this one image. It's a good a kithara for victory music. You need this big guitar, right, to celebrate a victory, and certainly a lot of triumphant kind of emotions in a lot of heavy metal songs.
One final thing, I'm pretty sure kithara, the word, is actually where we get guitar.
Yes.
I might start calling my guitar a kitara so I feel more fancy when I'm playing Wonderwall alone in my bedroom now. We've really enjoyed this double-parter on music, and we'd love to say a huge thank you to Dr Jeremy Swist. You can find more of his work on Twitter. He's at Metal Classicist. Again, that's at Metal Classicist. And you can catch us next time for a slightly less highbrow topic.